Hi, I'm Nick from Dorman Products, and today I'm here with Chris and Lemmy, and we are here to talk about writing service.
Yeah, that's right, Nick. We're talking, I guess, about some people in the shop that we don't traditionally focus on. That's the service writers. You know, that's a difficult job. Now, all of us have written service in some form or fashion. Chris also has quite a significant background of writing service, which is why he's up here today. But you know, writing service, I think, is as difficult as turning wrenches in a completely different way. It's
Absolutely.
Yeah, figuring out what makes a car tick and figuring out what makes a customer tick. Neither one is easy on some days, but let's hash it out, boys.
Yeah, sounds good. We should probably start out, give the viewers a good vision of what shops we've written service at. So, I mean, you wanna take that?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote service in a independent used car dealership. I think we had 12 techs at most times and had about 20 different bays. So yeah, big shop. We ran about 60 cars a day through the shop on a busy day. So we were cranking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to ask you about, can you expand a little more on independent dealer? That's almost like an oxymoron. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you guys just did everything. You serviced all makes.
Yeah, it was all makes and models, usually newer stuff, like less than 3 years old. So, you know, we saw mostly nice new cars that we sold, and then, you know, that customer base just continued to grow, and they would come back in for their routine service as needed.
Nice.
Very cool.
How about you? Tip shop.
So I started cutting my teeth at an independent tire dealer and wound up moving to another independent tire dealer. So across those two companies, I worked for 3 shops. What about you? What do you got?
Yeah, so for me, it's much different than both of your shops that you guys worked in. I pretty much wrote service for myself and just a few techs at my shop where it was mostly all custom work, which was obviously much different. So I'll have a much different outlook than you guys on all these topics.
Yeah, I agree. I'm doing something similar at this stage of life, but it's funny. Those sound like they should all be the same thing, but they're going to be different.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure.
So who was actually responsible to source out or price out the parts? And I know for me, it was always it was me. It was me. So I was kind of selling the work. I was either assigning it to my techs or I was doing the work, and I was sourcing the parts. Working in a shop like you worked in, like who was really responsible for like sourcing out the parts and, you know, purchasing the parts?
Yeah, so we actually had a parts department there that would source the parts. They didn't stock a whole ton of stuff, so they would stock, you know, oil, filters, your usual everyday stuff.
Right.
And then they would reach out to our suppliers to track down the parts. So the technician would go to the parts counter, order what they needed, and then write up the RO.
Nice.
Yeah, standard dealer model, really.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
Nice. How about you?
That's kind of interesting. So in the places I was at, it was usually the shop foreman was sourcing the parts, right? So your service writer is handling, selling everything to the customer. But as far as actually pulling parts in, that usually fell to the shop foreman. And that involved quite a few things, right? Primarily, you're gonna have your first call auto parts store for aftermarket, you know, new aftermarket auto parts, you know, the occasional salvage trip. Obviously, you're gonna have to deal with OEM from time to time, but generally that fell to the shop foreman. I would say, you know, if shop foreman's out, whatever service writer is gonna handle that, probably the senior most service writer. And then the tech also does have a say too, to some degree or another, right? So, you know, there were some techs I think who tried to always dictate what they were gonna install, and that didn't always work out. But, you know, we tried to give the tech a say, right? If techs that have installed those before, they're no good, or I really like this, or I want. Yeah, I think that moves all over the place, right? Because I know I definitely worked with some buddies who wrote service, and they were responsible, you know, especially in a smaller shop. I feel like service is handling a lot more things, right? They're not only finding the parts and sourcing them, but they're even like keeping them on schedule, right? Calling the parts store when the parts don't show up, or, you know, seeing if the dealer can, you know, if you made that last truck, or if you're gonna have to send somebody over to pick a part up.
I feel like in a high production shop, it has to be like that.
I almost feel like it's the other way around, to be perfectly frank. I almost wonder if in a larger shop, if it is kind of like a dealer type scenario where you do have the parts departments handling all of the parts, like anything you have to do with parts, they're taking, you know, responsibility for.
Yeah, I can tell you based on the volume that we ran through our shop, there was no way we had the capacity for the service writers to be tracking down parts.
I think it also helps, honestly, I think it helps your suppliers too. So think about if you're the dealer or the small parts store next to the big dealership, you don't want to deal with 20 different service writers calling you about stuff, right? Like, might make it easier on them.
Yeah, single source kind of.
Right, kind of helping your supplier.
Yeah.
You have to have good experiences and terrible experiences with customers. Give me some of them.
I just got to say that that writing service was the hardest job I've ever had.
I believe it.
I used to clean a butcher shop. Like, I've been around the block, and you know, you get pulled different directions all day long. You get you're trying to keep your customer happy, which is always first and foremost. You're trying to keep your technician happy and make sure that they're billing hours. You're trying to keep the brass happy upstairs. So there's a lot of different, boxes that you have to check every day. And then when you have like a problem car or a problem customer, it can spiral out of control real quick. And I'm sure we all have that one customer that sticks in our head, right?
Never. Every one of my customers.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. When I was actually working on cars, we had a lady that just came off the highway and had a flat tire in her van. So we just fixed it in the parking lot for her because the bays were full. And like a dummy, I grabbed the center of the wheel after she had been driving on the highway with a flat tire, and I burned myself so bad. Wow. I remember it like it's a palpable sensation. I can still
feel it.
Right.
I can feel it still.
But on the upside, you knew you were going to be able to sell her a hub assembly shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I basically cooked it right out of the car.
Nice.
For the most part, I really liked my customers, right? And I feel like when customers were in a bind or complaining about something, even if it was inconvenient for me, they had a legitimate point. There are very few people who are difficult for the sake of being difficult. So maybe I just got blessed with really good customers. But as far as like really good stories, I loved customers who would bring food.
Nice.
Perhaps unsurprisingly. But I always thought that it was so considerate. They didn't have to do this. That was probably my really good stuff. As far as bad stuff, I guess maybe I'll tell a story about me is being terrible. One of the things I used to do that was such a foul up. So as I said, I worked at 2 tire dealers. So you can imagine one of the most common repairs we got, surprise, surprise, was a flat.
Right.
It took me a good solid 6 weeks of working that counter to remember when somebody said, "Oh, I got a flat tire," to ask the obvious follow-up question, which one? If you don't ask which tire it is, you're making the poor tire guy look at every single tire with the squirt gun, like and trying to find a leak.
It's the one that's flat on the bottom.
Right, exactly. Which also,
If it's flat, it's hard. It's easy to
right.
find.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really easy to find.
The one with no air in it.
But I even got to the point where like if somebody said flat tire, I just like trained myself, just say which one?
Right.
Which one?
Right.
Have you ever had to fire a customer?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's a tough conversation to have. I remember one particular instance. I think it was a Saturday, and it was a very, very busy day. The whole waiting room was packed full of people.
They always are.
I had a gentleman come in to drop his vehicle off, and he was very boisterous and loud and of accusing our shop of stealing from him and being dishonest. And I took that to heart, and I took his keys, and I kind of thought about the situation for a couple minutes, and I decided it was time for us to break up.
Yep.
So I walked back into the showroom with his keys and his paperwork, and I said, I don't think this is going to work out. I think you should take your car somewhere else.
Not me, it's you.
Nice.
Yeah. And the look on his face was priceless, and the rest of the customers in the showroom, I think, really appreciated it too. So
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it was a good move, but it was a tough conversation to have.
The best customers are almost the ones you don't remember. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm thinking of this one fellow we had. He brought his entire family's car stuff, right? His car, his wife's car, his 2 daughters' cars. This guy, I'm sure he was single-handedly paying somebody's tuition at the shop. But he was a great customer. I loved having him there. The Pleasant customers are cool. I worked at a Ford dealer, and we had a fella who would bring in a 53 Country Squire. And he bought it from that dealer in 53. And it wasn't like he was bringing in his classic car or whatever. It was in very nice shape, but he was just bringing his car into the agency for service, which I always thought was like very funny, very neat. Yeah, it was super.
That's
Everybody loved working on the car because it was just, how often you get to work on a weird old straight 6 Woody wagon. It just never happened
to work on stuff like that.
So
nice. For a while.
I used to love when customers would describe what their car was doing. They would use the funniest terms. She gets grave digging on me real bad. And then it starts, shopping carting. People just use the funniest descriptions. And I used to love when people would make a noise. They're describing the car the noise makes. Because all of a sudden, people who normally are very conscious of how they look have no shame. And they're just replicating that noise so you can diag it there at the counter. And some of the noises people, and I would just ask them to keep making it over and over. And usually somebody would say, "Are you just doing this for fun?" And I was like, "Yeah, look, this job is not a great source of joy for me. And I'm really enjoying this."
Sometimes it's helpful,
This is
though.
a good portion of
Oh
this.
yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, I'm trying. You're right, exactly.
We had this lady who had an Audi TT. It was a really nice car. Kept it in the garage all the time. Only drove it once in a blue moon. It was starting to get cold, and she wanted to start driving her car in the fall and stuff, and it wouldn't start. Techs were putting hours and hours into this car trying to figure out why this thing won't start. Wasn't communicating with ScanTool, all this stuff. Turns out, rodent damage. So I think we had maybe 8 to 10 hours worth of wiring repairs trying to fix this car.
Wow.
Got it all fixed up, gave it back to the customer. A month later, she comes back. My car's not starting again. Oh no. Car gets towed back
Now
in.
you're married to this problem.
We own it. So it turns out, whatever the rodent was, I think it was actually a squirrel, got in there, chewed a whole bunch of other wires in a completely different area of the car. So we had to do the whole thing over again, just wiring repairs after wiring repairs. Nightmare.
Yeah.
But customer was awesome about it. She was like totally, on board with us fixing the car.
I mean, that's good because I feel like a lot of customers are just gonna be like, well, I just had it in here for this repair. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're responsible. I don't, and even though it's
yeah.
completely different, some customers are like that.
Yeah.
So how did your shop handle waiters versus leavers? Like, what did you guys do for waiters? Did you have a special procedure?
Yeah, so busy shop, we always had waiters. What we would do is bring them in at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 1 o'clock. So we had 3 specific times that the customers would come in, so that would actually help guide our technicians into how their workflow would go. So they knew when they got in the morning, they were going to have a waiting customer sitting there.
Right.
So they could kind of schedule the work around that. And it seemed to work out pretty well. Our customers were comfortable with it, and the techs, it seemed to make the shop flow a little bit better.
Probably good keeping the waiting room, also, so it's not completely full. If you have waiters coming in all day, you could end up with, too many people in one room,
Yeah, you don't have people that, sitting there taking naps because they showed up on an off hour. And,
how about you? How did your shops handle waiters?
Very differently than Chris. We generally kept a couple bays free for fast stuff we knew would turn quick. Your inspection, your tire work, your lube oil filter, etc. And we would kind of just accept them all the time. Like that was just that if you came in, you were fine. One of the things I thought was a challenge in terms of being a writer though was you have to oftentimes rapidly convert a waiter into a lever, right? So that's kind of huge. Like you have to let somebody know immediately, like, oh, this state inspection you thought you needed, by the way, you need 4 wheels worth of brakes and a couple of ball joints.
Right.
Like you're not sitting here anymore. Can I get you a ride home? Can I get you a ride to the mall? What do I need to do? Can I get you a rental?
That's always a tough one. I mean, nobody wants to abandon their vehicle and come up with plan B, right? So I was fortunate at the one shop I worked at where we had a rental car agency next door.
Wow.
So we would actually walk the customer over there and say, here, go get yourself a car. See you later.
Oh, they were giving them a good deal too, I'm sure.
It was like, hand to mouth. So it worked out great. But in other instances, we would work, if the customer was interested in looking at a new car, maybe we would say, hey, why don't you go take a test drive for an hour and let us work on your car and we'll figure it out later. Or we had a shuttle service too that was nice. So we had the tools in the toolbox to make it happen.
Nice.
Yeah, and when you think waiters versus levers, when I think of a waiter, I'm just automatically thinking somebody who drove up. And you said you actually had people scheduling waiting work, which was like call to schedule, that was not usually my experience. Usually somebody was just pulling in, right? They're on vacation or they're just rolling on in like, hey, can I get an oil change? Lot didn't look too full. I always thought that was really interesting. Like that was, it was a challenge. Like sometimes a fun one, sometimes a not so fun one. I know I at some point had, I had a corporate overlord, right? One of these tire dealers who will remain nameless had requested that we tell everybody, regardless of how busy we were, we'll get your car in and out in 30 minutes, which was oftentimes a bald-faced lie, but we would get phone shopped to make sure we were saying that. And that's very difficult, it's hard.
Yeah, that feels like a tough thing to kind of pose to your customers because more often than not, that's probably not going to be true, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially as these oil changes get more and more complex. I mean, I think even a basic oil change take darn near an hour at this point, right?
And the guy making you say that isn't the face, it's got to be your face,
Right, and you have to hose your customers, right? Like, I mean, you see the same people over and over as a writer. Right. Yeah, you're getting new people in and old people out, and somebody gets a new car, you don't see them for a few years, but you do see the same people, and it's really hard. Well, you said you get me out of here in 30 minutes. Yeah, I did say that because that's what my boss says I have to say. Like,
right.
That part didn't feel good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as you can imagine, in like a performance shop, I didn't really have any waiters. I didn't have any hotel accommodations to keep people for 3 to 6 months. But yeah, so I mean, nothing for me on this one. No waiters.
Yeah, I guess not. And I in thinking about it too, you must have just spent a lot more time with your customer too, right? Like I'm imagining even if somebody comes in to, for their first visit to discuss something, et cetera, was anybody walking out of there in 5-10 minutes? Probably not,
No,
I would think,
no,
right?
I would spend a ton of time with each one of my customers, even if they weren't a customer yet. If it was, just someone that came in and wanted to check out what I had, I would take them for a tour around the warehouse, show them all the things that we, because I also sold product. I didn't just install. So yeah, it was a thing. I didn't really see a customer for less than an hour,
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother topic, but I would have very little time to work on cars during the day. I'd actually be doing that in the after hours.
Right.
So yeah, well, completely different from like the traditional shop or dealership that offers service. So in your shop, full of people working, do you allow your customers to come back into the shop? Do you walk them back to show them the cars, or are the doors open? They can just kind of stroll around. I know for me, obviously, I would always take customers into the shop, but obviously the door wasn't open. They couldn't just come back whenever they wanted. But yeah, we did have customers back. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's good practice to walk your customer back to the shop, especially if you're trying to sell them something on their car. You can't really see or feel this stuff as you're driving a car, right? If whatever's broken, it's very difficult to identify that unless you physically see it. So I think there's a value in walking the customer into the shop, showing them what may be wrong with their vehicle and explaining to them what the process is and how they fix it. However, I think you really need to be careful on what you're walking your customer into in a shop full of,
shop full of technicians.
They're all in lab coats, right, aren't they? Affecting British accents, etc.
Not usually PC in a shop.
Yeah, it's like can get a little rough. So this may be due to my mechanical background. But maybe not. I always thought it was very important as a writer to actually get in there and get underneath a car 2 times. The first is, when a tech comes running out with their estimate grade, I got to understand what's wrong here. If there is something really bad, part of your job is to put on a little bit of a show, like you're saying. I'm gonna give you the show and tell of what's actually bad here. So if you have a bad tie rod, it doesn't feel terrible if you're just new to cars, right? You give it a shake and you're like, well, there's a little click in there. Who cares? You walk over to another car where it's good and say, give that. Oh, okay. There's no play at all.
Right.
Sometimes it's easy to do that, but I felt it was important that I had to get under there and I had to see the problem so I could explain it accurately to a customer and also kind of keep your tech in check, right? Like your better techs, whatever, they're just giving you a straight ahead estimate. But there are some techs who are, I don't want to say dishonest, let's just say ambitious. They're ambitious with their estimates. And then I think then that second trip is with the customer, to kind of come take a peek. And you guys both know if it's a shop on a nice day, right? You're gonna have customers who wander out of the waiting room. We kind of just naturally walk around and sort of like see if their car's been pulled in, etc.
In the bay.
Right, exactly. Nick, I'm thinking from your standpoint though, like, in an area where we're just working on people's like regular daily commuter, right? Like we say we can fix the car, they believe us, we move on. They see a lift, they're like, okay, clearly this place knows what they're doing. You probably had something different, right? Your customers gonna be better educated, and they you really had to sell stuff.
Absolutely,
to them, right?
And that's kind of why I would always a customer that was coming in and bringing their car in for a $20,000, whether it's fabrication or engine swap or something like that. They're going to want to see my capabilities. They're going to want to see what else I'm working on.
Yeah.
So it was almost, it was guaranteed that they were getting a tour. If they were going to be a potential customer, I was touring them through my whole facility,
Right.
And there was a lot to look at. It definitely built confidence. I had a 22,000 square foot warehouse full of, specialty parts and, service bays where it was interesting to look at.
Sure.
The downside was it took a long time. So if I took one customer, it was an hour. It was an easy hour because every corner we turned was another conversation.
Right. Here's the motor building room. Here's our, here's my tubing bender. Here's all the things I need. To
Seems important to build your brand, though, right? If you're trying to, win new business, it's important that people understand your capabilities.
And there would always be that kind of, conversation on the internet about, went to, Nick's shop and, he took me around, spent a lot of time with me. That was like, a really good, built my reputation up quickly because I gave that time to all the customers because I liked it. I'm a car guy, so it's easy for me to get lost in conversation. But, the downside is I lose productivity. I end up having to work late at night,
Right.
And, kind of what brought me into making that more of a hobby and, having my full-time here at Thermal Products.
Yeah, it's funny, like the shops Chris and I are working at, right? We're bringing your car back to factory specs, right? Whereas you're in that situation, you're re-engineering the vehicle, right? We're saying I can make this thing capable of a lot more than the factory imagines. I mean, you have a higher bar to meet. For sure.
Of course. Yeah, customers need to have that confidence.
Yeah, see. Yeah.
Yep. So in your shop environment, what did you guys do for billable time? Who made those decisions? Was it the shop foreman? Was it the service writer? Who really dictated, how much time you billed?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, it's almost a group powwow sometimes, right? So there's some stuff that's really straightforward, right? Like, oh, this car needs a water pump. Labor guide says 3.7, great, it pays 3.7. That's it. That's what you bill the customer for. That's what you pay the tech. Boop, everybody moves on with life. But there's some stuff that's a little bit different, right? It's stuff that requires heavy diag or electrical gremlins or stuff where you kind of sometimes you can charge the customer one price. You're going to tell them they're charging that. You wind up with a shop foreman and a tech sort of hashing out how much the tech is going to flag on a job, right? Because it's totally possible that if you follow the labor guide, a tech is going to starve. You don't want to do the tech dirty. You don't want to do the customer dirty. You don't want the shop to lose money. So if it's not straightforward, it kind of wound up being like a little bit of a conference.
Right.
In your case, I guess it's got to be You're just figuring it out, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was no labor guide. There was nowhere to look for, what this job cost. So, of course, in the beginning, getting into this, I had to lose my shirt on a lot of jobs to really learn the lesson of how to bill my time. And for me, I really would just kind of give my customer a range, a best case, a worst case, and even my best case wasn't really great because I needed to cover my, back. And a lot of times it was good because if they did commit to this higher price and I was able to get them out cheaper, which almost every time I was, they were always leaving happy. So it's much easier to, just kind of give them the worst case scenario, them commit to it, and then every time come in at, and make them happy with a lower price. So
totally agree.
That was super important to me. And, I'd love to hear your experience in a, bigger high volume shop.
Yeah, when you run into some of those tricky situations, like, wiring always pops into, you got a damaged wire or something you can't diagnose, it would almost be helpful to kind of pre-sell a couple hours worth of labor and then, maybe follow back up and say, hey, look, we got 2 hours worth of time into this car. Here's where we are. Here's what we think we know. And then, even beyond that, I think it still comes back to it. You're going to have to work that negotiation between what the technicians got into it for time versus what you can actually bill the customer. Because it's very difficult to, bill the customer for something that, tech has 8 hours into something. That's a really hard pill to swallow for your customer.
Yeah,
so you got to
unless you really prime them for it beforehand.
Yeah, and you can't always do that. So that's a little bit of a push-pull there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it gets rough too. Similarly, it gets rough when another shop's been in there already, right? Or if you see a repair that's already happened, right? It's weird because you think to yourself, okay, maybe this other shop didn't do so well by the customer. What am I inheriting now?
Right.
Like, how much responsibility do I bear here? And then you also kind of have to talk to the customer too, into saying, like, look, if we're gonna start down this path, it's gonna make probably best financial sense for you to stick with our shop, right? We gotta see this through to the end. Otherwise, you're gonna wind up, the next person down the line doesn't know what was checked and what wasn't checked. So
Yeah, that's part of that communication process. It's important to keep open the line of communication with your customer.
And that's a double-edged sword because I feel like some customers could say, oh, they're telling me I got to come here all the time. What are they up to? What are they trying to do? It's really an approach, and like you said, communication. Communication's key.
Yeah, if you can educate your customer, and I think it ties back to bringing your customer back into the shop. If you can bring them into the shop, show them, hey, the last shop did this. This is why this is incorrect, or why you may have caused another problem. And kind of educate them on, why your place is the best place.
Yeah, it'll build confidence. Yep. All right, so we've been in this industry a long time. What are some of your tricks that you learned and adapted over the years?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that helped me be successful was when I was selling work to a customer, the vehicle was in for service and needed some stuff. I would build it out as like a menu, right? So I'd give them maybe 3 options. Here's what you need today. Here's what's due. And here's what you should think about in the near future. And letting the customer kind of choose their own adventure seemed to work pretty well. You weren't really backing anybody into a corner.
It can be daunting for a customer, right? They don't know, like, should I do the tie rod end or should I do the busted door handle? Like, they don't know how serious each of these things are. So I like that. We actually have a Shop Press article about that too, kind of talking about sort of helping customers prioritize your right and service. So if you don't check out our blog, please do. You might find something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your take on this?
I mean, for me, my best trick was good communication, because if the customer, had trust and, knew what was going on at all times, it didn't leave them wondering. So that was the trick. I mean, there's a lot of shops, especially, doing like aftermarket performance. There's a lot of shops that are, just unreliable, not answering their phone. They didn't meet the deadline that they quoted. So instead of facing the customer and communicating with them or communicating with them beforehand, they're hiding. They're not answering their phone. Their doors are shut, and they're just kind of avoiding. They're screening their calls. And everybody went through it. I think when I first started 20 years ago, I did that at different points. And over the years, you learn, like, good communication. You kind of want to give the customer what you would expect.
It's easier to say than it is to actually do something.
It's true, because in the moment you're on the spot and you're just kind of like, yeah.
That maybe you're being deceiving your customer. It's that sometimes you just don't have the time.
Yeah, you're so busy, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to call Mrs. Jones, and then 3 hours gets by. The car's supposed to be ready. You're like, oh no.
And now at that point, you're kind of afraid because she's already angry. So now you start avoiding.
You got to peel them off the ceiling a little bit.
One thing I learned to do pretty early on when I was writing service, when I was putting together my bucket. When I say a bucket, that's the thing we used to use to put our, to put the work order and the keys in. There was these vinyl envelopes. Every shop has them. One of the things I would slide in there too is I would print service history if the vehicle had been at our shop before. So let's pretend a car comes in, it's got 63,000 miles on it, right? The tech is, if the tech's got, you know, 2 brain cells to rub together, he's gonna be looking at, oh, did this get its 60,000 mile service, right? But if the car was just in for a 60,000 mile service, I don't want that showing up on the estimate, right? So I want the tech to have a good idea what we've done. Again, come back to maybe your drivability issue or an electrical problem, whatever. I want all those notes coming out so that a tech doesn't have to come back and ask me 15 questions. It's all right there in black and white. And sometimes it can even help too if you know, we would write notes sometimes back of invoices. You actually pull a physical invoice, and I'm going way back in time here because we're talking about printing stuff, but you know, you make a photocopy of that, throw it in there. I felt like that was helpful. It helped the tech not recommend stuff or go chasing information that wasn't necessary. But then it helped me too, not suggest something to a customer maybe if they just had done. You want to look like a real goon. Suggest that you perform a service that you just performed.
Yeah,
like
that's a good way to lose a customer.
Right, exactly. You sure you know what
you need a cabin filter? I just did that last time I was here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you definitely don't want that.
So I don't know if that's a trick, but it definitely saved me from having egg on my face more than once.
Yeah, it's more a ton of time too, right? I mean, it's saving your customer time, it's saving your tech time. You've already checked the boxes, right? You already know what's been done to the vehicle.
Yeah, I wish I could claim credit for that. Somebody showed me to do it, and I was like, oh, that makes
super
important. And I took that with me to shops that didn't do it for sure.
Well, I think we covered it all. I really enjoyed getting your insight, you know, from different perspectives. I'd love to get the insight of people viewing this.
Always
drop it in the comments. If you have another suggestion for a video, we'd like that too. I'm Nick. This is Chris, Lemmy. Thanks for watching.